Nusach Haggadah, the text of the Haggadah. Today we have a very interesting chapter of Rambam. The Rambam, because he wrote a book that's supposed to be the manual, the guide for all of Jewish law, so he doesn't just tell you the laws of how to live. He also includes in his book the texts of different Jewish texts that are required as part of living a Jewish life. For example, at the end of the second book of the Rambam, we had a whole section of the Seder HaTfilot. He gave us the text for all the prayers throughout the entire year. So here, because we're talking about Pesach, and he mentions the Haggadah, the obligation to recite the story of the Exodus, so he also gives us the Nusach Haggadah, the text. What are we supposed to exactly say as part of the Haggadah at the Seder? And what's fascinating is that this is one of the places where the 3 chapters of Rambam and the 1 chapter are a bit different. You know, we're learning every day 1 chapter of Rambam, but simultaneously there are other cycles that learn 3 chapters of Rambam a day. In the 3 chapters of Rambam cycle, what we're about to study today is not considered to be its own chapter. It's considered to be an addendum to chapter 8. So in the 3 chapter cycle, you would learn chapter 7, chapter 8, today's text of the Haggadah, and tomorrow's chapter, which is Hilchot Shofar, chapter 1. But in the 1 chapter cycle, the Rebbe made it such that we should study this text of the Haggadah separately, as a chapter unto itself. So it's one of those rare occasions where we're really on our own in a certain way. The Haggadah, of course, is one of those mysterious books. On the one hand, it's the book with the most commentaries ever written on it. Out of all Jewish books.
Even more than
Huh?
even more than Pirkei
They say Pirkei Avos, the Megillah, and the Haggadah have the 3 top spaces. But literally every year, hundreds of new explanations are written, commentaries. It's just...
Every year?
Every year. Every year new books are written. Because it's written in a very, very precise and cryptic way sometimes. And the funny thing is that we don't know who wrote it. We don't know the actual author of the Haggadah. This is a picture of definitely one of the earliest printed Haggadot. Printed in the Sansino press in 1486. There's a Haggadah, I believe, from 1485, even 1 year earlier than that. But it's definitely one of the first. That's the first printed one. The text, we don't really know. Some attribute it to Moshe Rabbeinu. In the Mishnah, in the Talmud, there are sections of the Haggadah that we recite today, different parts. But the first codified Haggadah, as we know it, came about in the beginning of the Gaonic era. Right after the Talmud lived the Gaonim. Rabbi Amram Gaon was the first person to make a codified text. 60 years later, his student, Rav Sadia Gaon, also made a text. And based on those, the Rambam seems to have adopted his text. And over time, it kind of, based on different communities, the customs developed a little bit more, and there's different small differences, let's call it. But generally, the thrust is all the same.
Few things added to the Haggadah?
Yeah, a couple of paragraphs, how to say certain things.
So before then, what were people doing on Seder night?
There was definitely some kind of a Haggadah in place, because there are the basic principles. You have to mention, we saw yesterday, Matchil Bignut, Mesayem Bishvach, you begin with the bad, you end with the good, Pesach, Matzah, and Maror. The 4 questions have to be asked. So there's a basic guidepost. The 4 questions? Yes.
Cups? Or that
The 4 cups,
Okay.
way back when.
Right.
So many of the core principal elements were already there. The question is exactly how to say it, in which order. Okay, that developed and was codified later. So the Rambam gives us his version of the text, which we mostly follow today, with a couple of differences depending if you're Ashkenazic or Sephardic. So let's go for it. Nusach Haggadah shenohagu ba Yisrael bizman hagolus. The text of the Haggadah, which the Jews are accustomed to use in the time of exile, when we don't have a Passover sacrifice, and so those elements of the Seder have to be deleted. So what are we left with? Kachi. It goes like this. Maschil al kois sheni ve'omer. You begin on the second cup. First cup is the Kiddush. You fill up the second cup, and you begin to recite ve'omer bivihilu yatzanu mimitzrayim. This is a very famous line for the Sephardim. We went out of Egypt in a rush. That's the first declaration we make. Yetziat Mitzrayim was done hurriedly. Oh, by the way, here's another picture of a Haggadah. This is from 1629, printed in Venice, in Italy, with pictures, illustrations.
I have from Holland.
A Holland Haggadah. There's very rare Haggadot sold in auctions, and yeah, it's the collector's items. Actually, when my uncle got married in 2008, so the cloud and these online drives weren't so developed yet. It wasn't like a commonplace thing. Today, I think it would be worthless. But at his wedding, he gave out, as a memento, a disc, a CD disc, with 1,500 Haggadot commentaries. It was considered to be like a massive collection at the time. Today, you go up online and any one of these websites has them all, plus more. But at the time, it was considered a big achievement. So that's an old Haggadah. But the point is, we're going to learn the text of the Haggadah as the Rambam. So he begins, Yetziat Mitzrayim was done in a rush. Then we say, Hey lach ma'anya, or ha lach ma'anya, depending on which custom you have. Hey means here is the poor man's bread, or ha means this. The idea is you're pointing at the matzah that's at the table and you're saying this, or here is the bread of affliction, the poor bread, the acholu avasana ba'ara de Mitzrayim, which our forefathers, our ancestors ate in the land of Egypt. Kol dichfin yeseh v'yechol. Then we invite anybody who's hungry, come and eat. Kol ditzrich lepesach yeseh v'yifsach. Anybody who needs to make a Passover Seder or a Passover sacrifice should come and make the Passover Seder or the Passover sacrifice. And then we give a wish. Hashata hacha l'shata da asya ba'ara de Yisrael. This year we're here. The coming year we should be in Israel. Hashata hacha avdei l'shata da asya b'nei chardei. This year, now, we're here as slaves. In the coming year we should be free men. In other texts, this last line is in Hebrew because they didn't want the Babylonian B'nei Charei in Aramaic. Yeah. In other texts, it says B'nei Chorin in Hebrew because since it was composed in a time when everybody spoke Aramaic, the Jews didn't want people to know what they're wishing for. Your neighbor walked down your street, they hear you say, next year we should be free. They think you want to go against the government or something.
The Kol Dichfin was being said at those times?
Kol Dichfin was being said.
Did they open doors and say it, or just say it inside the
They would
house?
say it inside. There's a big question in the commentaries why you're inviting people at the Seder,
Yeah.
Like you're already in the house. Who are you inviting? Whoever's here is already here. So psychologically, they say you're inviting yourself to the Seder because, we do it year after year. We can get bored of it. So you have to invite yourself, take part of it. Be present. Look, like I said, the Haggadah has the most commentaries. We can discuss each paragraph forever and ever, why it starts off with this and that, and why is this paragraph all mixed up with 3 random topics. But we're going to leave it, we're just learning the text. Then you say the 4 questions. Ma nishtana halayla hazeh mikol haleilos. Why is this night different than all other nights? Shebechol haleilos ananu matbilin afilu pa'am echos. Halayla hazeh shtei pa'amim. All nights we only dip not even once. And tonight we're dipping twice. Shebechol haleilos anu eichlim chametz u'matzah. Halayla hazeh kolei matzah. All nights we eat chametz or matzah, and matzah. Tonight we only eat matzah. Shebechol haleilos anu eichlim shar yirakos. Halayla hazeh marer. All nights we eat other vegetables. Tonight we eat only bitter herbs. All nights we eat, whether reclining or sitting. Tonight we're all reclining. And then we begin to tell the story as the answer to the questions. You want to know why tonight's different? Well, because tonight's a very special night. What happened? We were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. And God, our God, brought us out from there with a strong hand and an outstretched arm. And if God wouldn't have taken our ancestors out of Egypt, still, we, our children, and our children's children would be enslaved to Pharaoh in Egypt. It's a pretty bold statement. Commentaries explain, if we wouldn't have left, Jews give power to whichever government they're under. So if the Jews would have stayed in Egypt, Egypt would have retained power, the pharaohs would have lasted all the way till today. And therefore, because it's such a great miracle, says the Rambam, says the Haggadah, even if kulanu chachamim, kulanu nevainim, kulanu zikenim, kulanu yedim asatayra, even if we're all wise and we're all in understanding and we're all elderly and we all know the entire Torah, mitzvah aleinu lesaper b'yitzias Mitzrayim, it's still a commandment upon us to tell that story of the Exodus which transformed us forevermore. Shekal hamarich lesaper b'yitzias Mitzrayim harizem meshubach. For anybody who lengthens the story of the Exodus is praiseworthy. And you want to see a proof of that? You want to see a proof that even the wisest sages spoke about the Seder night, spoke about the Exodus? Here's a story. Ma'aseh Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Tarfon. There was a story. It was 5 great rabbis gathered one time. Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yehoshua, Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Tarfon. Shayu Mesubin b'Bnei Brak. They were reclining at a Seder in Bnei Brak. They spoke about the Exodus all that night. They didn't do a quick express Seder like we do. All night they spent talking about the Exodus. Ad shabo salmideim v'amru lahem, till their students came and said, Rabbi Seinu, higiyaz man kriyash Shacharis, rabbis, it's already time for the morning Shema. We got to go to shul.
It's almost humorous. Is that how long we are allowed to do shul, or do we have different guidelines?
We have the same.
And stuff like that.
No, we also have the same guidelines in terms of telling the story at length. The mitzvahs of the night have to be done earlier in the night. And these rabbis, of course, did that. They did the Haggadah in the proper order, they did the matzah, they did the maror, but they kept on talking and the conversation kept going all the way to the end of the morning. And at that conversation, one of the rabbis said the following, Amar Lahem, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said to them, Harei ani kiven shivim shana. I'm like 70 years old. He wasn't actually 70. When he was 18, a miracle happened and he got white hair in his beard, so he would be honored and appointed as the Nasi, as the prince of the generation. He said, I'm as though I'm 70 years old, and I never merited to have my opinion be accepted that the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim should be recited at night. There's a mitzvah in the Torah to remember the Exodus from Egypt every single day. One of the 6 remembrances that we say every day after Shacharit, Laman Tizkor, we say, remember the Exodus from Egypt. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was of the opinion that Yetziat Mitzrayim should also be mentioned at night. And he said, I could never get everybody else to agree with me, Ad Shadrasha ben Zoma, till Ben Zoma came and expounded it. He learned it out from a verse. Shanemar, for it says, Laman Tizkor es yom tzeitzchem Eretz Mitzrayim kol yemei chayecha. You should remember the day of your exodus from Egypt, all the days of your life. Now, the Torah doesn't say any extra words. So it could have just said, Laman Tizkor et yom tzeitzchem Eretz Mitzrayim. Period. You should remember your exodus from Egypt. What's the extra words, all the days of your life? So the Haggadah expounds. Yemei chayecha, the days of your life means hayamim, the days. By daytime, you should remember the Exodus. Kol yemei chayecha haleilos. The extra word all the days of your life comes to include the nights. The Chachamim Maimonides, the sages who argued, they used to expound it differently. They would say, no, yemei chayecha, the days of your life means ha'olam hazeh, in this world. Kol yemei chayecha lehavi limayis haMashiach. All the days of your life includes even the days of Mashiach. Even when Mashiach comes, we're going to still remember the Exodus from Egypt, which is a massive chidush. It's a massive novelty, because if you think about it, the Midrash says, and the Rambam brings it down later on in the book, that when Mashiach comes, all holidays are going to become canceled. And yet we're going to mention Yetziat Mitzrayim every day. The Hasidic explanation is because when Mashiach comes, the revelation is so great that all the other holidays aren't special anymore. They're like a regular day of Mashiach's times. But the transformation that happened by Yetziat Mitzrayim was so big and so powerful that it will still be felt when Mashiach comes.
Even Purim?
Purim is not going to be canceled.
So not all holidays.
Except for Purim, you're right.
Okay. And why Purim?
Why Purim? Because it's also, Purim exceeds all levels of hishtalshalut, chain reactions. What does it mean canceled? It's a big discussion. The Rebbe once said that it doesn't mean we're going to stop keeping the holidays, but their specialty will be canceled. They won't be special. No, we're going to observe all the mitzvahs. That's no doubt about it. But canceled in the sense of the specialty of the day. Okay, then we go on to talk about the 4 sons. Baruch HaMakom Shenosan Torah Yisrael Baruch Hu. Blessed is the omnipresent one, Hashem, who is everywhere. He gave the Torah to the Jewish people. Blessed is He. Keneged Arba Avanim Dibra Sayda. Torah spoke about 4 children and gave answers to 4 types of children. Echad Chacham ve'echad Rasha ve'echad Tam ve'echad Shnei Yedei Alishal. One who is wise, one who is wicked, one who is simple, and one doesn't know how to ask. Chacham Mahu Eimer. What does the wise son say? He asks a question. What exactly? He gets very involved. What are the different types of mitzvahs? Eidot, the testimonial mitzvahs, chukim, the mitzvahs that we do, beyond rational logic, mishpatim, the explainable mitzvahs that God commanded you. Tell me everything. Af ata emer lo ki hilchos Pesach. You should tell him all the laws of Pesach. He wants to know. Give him all the information up to the final law relevant for the night. Ein maftirin achar Pesach afikayman, that we don't have dessert after the Korban Pesach sacrifice or the final piece of matzah which we eat. In other words, if he's wise, if he's inquisitive, give him all the information he wants.
Who labeled them in Russia?
The Talmud. In the Jerusalem Talmud, we have the earliest references for these different types of sons, and it's there, yeah. Rasha Mahu Eimer, what does the wicked son say? He comes with a challenge. Maha Avoida Hazois Lachem. What is this work for you? Sitting here at the Seder, what is it you guys are all doing over here? Lachem v'lo Eloi. He says to you, not to him. Because he removed himself from the community, he also denies the core principle of Judaism. He seems to deny God's existence. You should blunt his teeth and tell him, you know what? This is what God did for me when I left Egypt. Me, not you. If If you were there, you wouldn't have been redeemed. Seems like a pretty harsh answer to the Rasha. And over generations, almost all of Jewish literature understood the Rasha in a negative light. You blunt his teeth, this guy excludes himself, you give him a piece of your mind, let him know what's going on. The Rebbe came and redeemed the Rasha. The Rebbe would say, the Rasha, yeah, he's a challenger. How do you answer the challenge? He says, you, not me. So we tell him, you're right. Your differentiation would be valid over there. If you would be in Egypt, you wouldn't be redeemed. It's true. There was a very high barometer in Egypt. But today, every Jew is included.
Even Russia.
Even the Russias. As a matter of fact, we put him next to the Chacham. We don't put him last. We put him next to the wise son because he deserves that attention. The Rebbe once said, the Rasha at least is interested. He's there. He's asking questions. He's challenging. He's poking. That's good. Worse than a Rasha is a guy who doesn't know how to ask. A guy who just he's apathetic. And even worse is the fifth son who doesn't even show up. All these four sons are at the Seder. But the point is, the Rasha is looked at as the Jews were transformed by the Exodus to the point of no return. If you were there, yes, you wouldn't be redeemed. But if you're here now at the Seder, oh, you're part of us. Tam Mahu Eimer, what does a simple son say? Mazois. He just asks, what's this? Give me all the info that I can know. So you tell him also simply, with a strong hand, Hashem took us out of Egypt, from the house of bondage. One who doesn't know how to ask, you have to initiate. You get him to ask a question. And you give him the following riddle. Shenemar, you tell him, look, it says in the verse, I'm supposed to tell my son on this day, on that day, saying that it is because of this that God did the miracles when I went out of Egypt. So when are we supposed to talk about the miracles? So this is, again, a father initiating conversation with his son. So you get your son to start asking questions. How? You say, hey, son, look at the verse. It says I should tell my son. Maybe it means from the beginning of this month. I should be talking about the Exodus all the time. Talmud Leimar, no, it says Bayayim Hahu, on that day. Bayayim Hahu, if we only look at the words on that day, maybe it means during the day. Talmud Leimar Ba'avur Zeh. So the verse says, because of this. I only have the obligation when this, and I can point to the stuff on the table and say, this is the reason, the matzah and the maror are the reason why I'm going out of Egypt. And so by getting this conversation going, you'll get the kid to ask questions. Hey, why are we doing this with the matzah and the maror? And once you have him asking questions, then you can engage him in conversation, and boom, he's part of the Seder. Then we do what the Rambam said to do, is talk about our not so bright history. In the beginning, our ancestors were servants of other gods. But now, Hashem brought us close to His service. As it says, Joshua, at the end of his life, said to all the Jewish people, so said God, the God of Israel. Your ancestors always lived on the other side of the river, beyond the Euphrates River it's talking about. Terach avi Avram ba'avi Nachor, we're talking about Terach, the father of Abraham Avinu, the father of Nachor. And they served other gods. In the beginning, that's, they were not monotheists. But then I took, Hashem says, Avraham, your father, from the other side of the river, and I brought him throughout the entire land of Canaan. I increased his children by giving him Yitzchak. I gave Yitzchak two children, Yaakov and Esav. I gave Esav that Mount Seir, that's his portion to inherit. Yaakov and his children went to Egypt, and the rest is history, as they say. But in the beginning, it wasn't so nice. And then we say, blessed is God who guards His promise to Israel, His nation. Blessed be He. Because God already pre-calculated the end of the Exodus time. So that He can fulfill what He said to Avraham Avinu in the covenant between the parts. When He promised him, as it says, God told Avram, know, you should know. Your children, your offspring will be sojourners. They're going to be strangers in a land that's not theirs. They're going to enslave them. They're going to pain them for 400 years. But then in the end, the goy, the nation that they will enslave, that they will serve, I will judge. And afterwards they will go out with great possessions, as they indeed did. V'hi, and then we say that promise, she'amda la'aveseinu v'lanu, is what stood for our fathers and for us. That promise back then, Hashem kept throughout all generations. Anti-Semites have always existed. Shaloi echad bilvad amad aleinu. It wasn't just one person, one pharaoh, who stood against us, to destroy us. In every generation, the non-Jews contrive ways, they come up with ways to annihilate us. And Hashem saves us from their hand. And here we move to the part of the Haggadah where we expound the portion of Arami Oved Avi. As we said yesterday and 2 days ago, when the Jew would bring Bikurim, the first fruits, to the temple, he would recite a couple of verses which summarize Yetziat Mitzrayim in short. And in the Haggadah, we find tremendous treasures in every word of those verses, hinting to certain elements of the slavery and the Exodus. Tzei ulamad, says the Haggadah, go forth and learn Ma bikesh Lavan Harami lases liYaakov Avinu, what it was exactly that Lavan Harami, the Aramean, wanted to do to Jacob. In other words, back then already, this anti-Semitism started, when it was just, an uncle and a nephew. Even Pharaoh only decreed upon the Jewish boys to kill them. But Lavan Harami wanted to destroy everything. Shenemar, as it says, Arami oived avi. The Aramean wanted to destroy my father. And because of that, Vayered Mitzrayim, he went down to Egypt, Vayagar Sham, and he lived there. And here we're going to immediately start commenting on the verse. What does it mean he went there to live? It means he didn't go ever to settle. Jacob didn't go down to move his family, and a new destination to live out his life. He only went lagur. Gur in Hebrew implies temporary dwelling. Lagur sham. Shenamar, as it says, v'yemru al parei, they told Pharaoh, Jacob and his sons, lagur ba'aretz banu, ki ein mir latzena shel avadecha. We came to live in this land because we don't have any pasture for our sheep that belong to your servants. Ki chaved arav be'eretz Canaan, because the hunger was very tough back then in Israel, in the land of Canaan. Ba'ata yeshvu na'avadecha be'eretz Goshen. And so, now please let your servants settle in the land of Goshen. So we see that the whole descent to Egypt was only temporary. Bimsei ma'at, he came down with a very small crowd. As it says, only with 70 souls your fathers came down to Egypt. And now God has placed you and made you as large and as numerous as the stars of the heavens. Over there in Egypt, he became a nation. What does it mean he became a nation in Egypt? That means that the Jews became distinct there. Everybody knew that they stayed Jewish. The Talmud says, the Midrash says, they didn't change their clothes, they didn't change their name, they didn't change their language. Even in Egypt, they never fully assimilated. Godil v'atzum, they were a great and mighty or intense nation. As it says, Bnei Yisrael paru v'yishritzu v'yirbu v'yatzmu b'ma'id ma'id. The Jewish people were fruitful and swarmed and multiplied and became numerous, very, very much. The land became full of them. Varav, and they were a populous nation. As it says, Revava Ketzema Chasad Nesatich. This is in Ezekiel. It's the chapter that describes Yetziat Mitzrayim. Over there it says, I made you as numerous as the plants of the field. Vatirbi, vatigdali, vatavayi ba'adi adayim. You grew, you developed, you became very attractive. Shadayim nochenu sa'arich tzimeach. Your breasts were proper, your hair had grown. Va'at erim be'eria, but you were naked and bare. You had no mitzvot, as the commentaries explain. You grew in Egypt, but you didn't get any commandments. And then what happened? Vayareyu oisanu hamitzrim. The Egyptians did us bad. As it says, Pharaoh told his advisors, let's come up with an idea against the Jewish people. Pen yirbeh, because he might get too much, they might get too big. And it's going to happen if a war is going to take place. The Jewish people are going to add themselves to our list of enemies. They're going to have a war with us, and they're going to leave this land. Or as other commentaries explain it, they're going to make us leave the land. So they pained us. As it says, they placed upon us taskmasters to make us experience pain in our loads. And the Jewish people built storage cities for Pharaoh, the Egyptian cities of Pitom and Ramses. They placed upon us hard work. As it says, the Egyptians enslaved the Jewish people with backbreaking labor. So we cried out to God, the God of our fathers, as it says, it was in those many days, those long days of slavery, the king of Egypt died. The commentaries explain didn't actually die, he just got lesions of tzarat. When a person has tzarat, the Talmud says he's considered dead. So he got these lesions, and the doctors of his told him that the only way to cure it was to kill Jewish babies and rinse in their blood. So the slavery got very bitter. The Jewish people groaned out of their hard work, and they cried out to God. And their pleas actually went up, and they reached God from this tough work. And God heard our voice. As it says, God heard their cries. And God remembered his covenant that he had made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And God further saw our pain. What was the pain that he saw? The fact that we had to separate from normal family life. We couldn't have children anymore. How do we know that God saw this pain? As it says, God saw the children of Israel and God knew. He took note, he became aware. But he also saw our difficult labor. Elu habanim, it refers to the children. Child rearing, it's tough. As it says, what was the problems with the children? All children that are born, throw them into the river, all sons, and all daughters you shall let live. Or the Egyptians should actually make them live in their ways, make them assimilate into their culture. So there was problems with the kids. God saw that too. And God saw our oppression, which is the pressure that the Egyptians subjected us to. As it says, I also saw the pressure to which the Egyptians subjected you to. And God took us out of Egypt. Him himself, not through an angel, not through a seraph, a burning angel, not through a shaliach, through an agent. God in his honor. As it says, I will pass through the land of Egypt on this night. And I will smite every firstborn in the land of Egypt, from man to animal. And I will do justice to all the gods of Egypt. Ani Hashem, I am God. Me alone is coming down to redeem you. Biyad chazaka. And now the Torah gives a couple of descriptions to the way God took us out of Egypt. He took us out with a strong hand. Zehadever, that's a reference to pestilence, to the epidemic on the animals. As it says, God's hand will be directed at the cattle, your cattle in the field. The horses, the donkeys, the camels, the cattle, and the sheep. Dever kaved ma'oid, a very severe epidemic. So we see there the expression hand, Yad Hashem. That's how we know that Yad Chazakah refers to the dever. Uvizraya netuya, with an outstretched arm. Zu hacherev, that's the sword, the metaphorical sword that God used to smite the Egyptians. As we find the expression netuya, outstretched, in reference to the sword, as it says, V'charbay shlufa biyadai netuya al Yerushalayim. His unsheathed sword is in his hand; it is outstretched over Jerusalem. Uvemayra gadol zu gilu shchina, and the word moragadol, great awesomeness, refers to the fact that God revealed his presence in the process of the Exodus. Shenemar, as it says in Devarim, God asks the Jews a rhetorical question. Oy hanisa elikim, has God ever tried lavoi lakachas loigoy mikerev goy, to come, to take out one nation from within another? B'masois, b'oisois, u'v'meifsim, u'v'milchama, u'v'yad chazaka, u'v'izrei netuya, u'v'mayroim gedolim, with miracles, with signs, with wonders, with war, with a mighty hand, with an outstretched arm, with terrifying awesomeness. Like everything that God did for you in Egypt as you were watching. So it's a rhetorical question in context, but here we see in the verse that as part of God taking us out of Egypt, there was Mora'im Gedolim, great awesomeness which revealed his Shekhinah. Uva'isa is the sign Zahamata. That was the stick, the staff that Moshe used to perform the miracle. Shenemar, as it says, V'samata zatikach biyadecha shatasa b'yasa'isa, take this staff in your hand with which you will do the signs. Uvemoifsim zahadam, and the big miracles, the wonders, that was the blood. Shenemar, as it says, V'nasati moifsim b'shamayim uva'aretz dam va'esh v'simres ashan. In this verse, we see the word moifsim and dam together. I will make miracles in heaven and earth, blood, fire, and pillars of smoke. Davar acher, another explanation of these last 5 expressions. If you look at each one, there's either 2 words or it's written in the plural form. So homiletically we can expound, B'yad chazaka shtayim. The word mighty hand refers to 2 plagues. Uvizrei netuya shtayim. The next 2 words, outstretched arm, refer to 2 plagues. Uvamayra gadol shtayim. Great awesomeness also is 2 words, refers to 2 plagues. Uvaoisais, here's a plural form of miracles, signs. Shtayim, that's another 2 plagues. Uvemoifsim shtayim, and the word moifsim, also written in the plural form, is also a reference to 2 plagues. So in total we have 10. Elu eser makos shehevi HaKadosh Baruch Hu ala mitzrayim b'mitzrayim. These are the 10 plagues which God brought upon the Egyptians in Egypt. Ve'elu hein, and they are the following: dam tzfardei akinim, blood frogs lice; arev dever shchin, wild animals, pestilence and boils, barad arbe cheshach makas b'chayres, hail, locusts, darkness, and the smiting, the death of the firstborns. Rabbi Yehuda hayanesin bahem simon. Rabbi Yehuda would apply an abbreviation to them, Ditzach adash be'achav, Dalet tzadek chaf, that's dam tzfardei akinim, ayin dalet shin, arov dever shchin, beis aleph ches beis, barad arbe choshach, and bechorot, makat bechorot. Why did he give this mnemonic? Because the plagues appear in two places in the Torah. Once in the book of Exodus, and a second time in Tehillim, and in a different order. So he gave this order to know the true order that it actually happened in. And then we turn to the three central features of the Seder, which we must discuss to fulfill our obligation. Rabbi Gamliel used to say, anybody who did not discuss these three things on Pesach has not fulfilled his obligation to tell the story properly. Pesach, matzah, u'mereidim, the Passover sacrifice, the matzah, and the maror. And then you describe each one. Pesach, shahayu avesenu eichlin. Bisman shebeis hamikdash kayam, the Passover sacrifice, which our fathers used to eat at the time when the temple existed. Al shumma, why did we do it? Why did we used to have the Passover sacrifice? Al shum shepasach hamakim al batei avesinu b'mitzrayim, because Hashem skipped over. That's where the English name comes from, Passover, over our fathers' homes in Egypt. Shenemar, as it says, the Torah is talking about when your children will ask you, why do you celebrate Pesach? Ba'amartem, you will say to them, Zevach Pesach hu Hashem. It is a Passover sacrifice to God. Asher Pasach al batei b'nei Yisrael b'mitzrayim. For he passed over the homes of Israel in Egypt. Benogpayas Mitzrayim v'ezbatenu hitzel, when he smote the Egyptians and saved our homes. And at that time, when Moshe told this to the Jewish people, they bowed down and they prostrated themselves. That's the Passover sacrifice. Matzah zu shano eichlim al shumah. What about the matzah which we do eat? Passover sacrifice our father did. This matzah which we do eat nowadays too, why do we do it? Al shum shaloi hispik b'tzeikam shalav v'seinu lahachmitz, because our father's dough didn't have enough time to rise. Ad shenigla aleim melech malchi amlochem hakadosh baruch hu ga'olam miyad, by the time that the King of Kings, Hashem, revealed himself to the Jewish people and redeemed them right away. Shenemar, as it says, Vayofu as habotzek asher yitziu mimitzrayim ugais matzos. The Jewish people baked the dough which they took out of Egypt into matzah cakes, ki loy chametz, not chametz, ki gershu mimitzrayim v'lo yochlu liyisman vayah, because they were chased out of Egypt, they couldn't delay. The gam tzeda lo yosu lehem, and they also hadn't prepared other provisions for themselves. What about these marors that we eat, the bitter herbs that we eat? Why do we eat them? Al shum shemeru hamitzri mischaya v'sinu b'mitzrayim, because the Egyptians embittered the lives of our forefathers in Egypt. Shenemar, as it says, vayimararu es chayim ba'aveda kasha. They embittered their lives with tough work, b'chemeru v'levenim, with mortar and with bricks, and with all types of work in the field. All their work which they worked them with backbreaking labor. And not only did it happen back then, but as we said the other day, in every generation a person is obligated to see himself as though he went out of Egypt. For not only our fathers alone did he redeem, also us he redeemed. As it says, God took us out of there to bring us, to give us the land which he promised to our forefathers. Therefore, because we're also part of this, we are obligated to thank, to praise, to laud, to glorify, to magnify, to adore, and to give eternal honor to the one, to he who did for us and for our fathers all of these miracles. He took us out from servitude to freedom, from enslavement to redemption, from sorrow to joy, from mourning to holiday, from darkness to a great light. And therefore let us recite before him the chapters of Tehillim which begin with Hallelujah, that's the Hallel, and then we say the first two paragraphs of the Hallel, chapter 113 and 114 of Psalms. Hallelujah, Hallelujah Abdei Hashem, Hallelujah Shem Hashem, Yishem Hashem Mevarach v'chulei, Ad Chalamish L'mayim Emayim. Hallelujah. Yeah, the translation is praise God, the servants of God praise the name of God, let the name of God be blessed, etc., until the miracle of Kriyat Yam Suf, when Hashem turned the flintstone into a stream of water. Actually, a reference to the time in the desert when God turned the stone into water. And then we conclude with the following blessing: Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech ha'olam. Blessed are you, God, our God, King of the universe. Asher ga'alanu v'ga'al savasenu mimitzrayim. That you redeemed us and you redeemed our fathers from Egypt. V'higyanu l'halayla hazel lechol b'ei matzah u'mereidim. And you allowed us to reach this night to eat matzah and maror on it. Cain, so too Hashem Elokeinu. May God, our God, yagi'enu l'meyadim v'lirgalim achirim abayim l'krasenu l'shalim. May God help us reach other festivals, other holidays that are coming toward us in peace. Let us rejoice in the rebuilding of your city. Let us be happy with your service. And we will eat there from the sacrifices and the Passover sacrifices, whose blood will reach the wall of your Mizbeach for goodwill. And we will thank you with a new song for our redemption and for the redemption of our souls. Baruch atah Hashem, Ga'al Yisrael, blessed are you, God, who has redeemed Israel. That's the end of the Haggadah. And the Rambam now adds a final comment. The same order which we make the blessings and read the Haggadah on the night of the first holiday, the first day of Pesach, so too do we repeat the exact same Seder again on the second night of Pesach, which is kept in the diaspora, where we keep 2 days of holiday. And also we're obligated on the second night to do all the mitzvahs, to have 4 cups of wine, and to do all the other things which were done already on the first night. And with that we conclude, Brich Rachamana Desaya, and blessed be the merciful one who grants us assistance. Mazal Tov for concluding, Hilchot Chametz Umatzah.